Fellow delegates, friends, welcome to this session titled Supporting Civil Society Under Pressure, How Charity Lotteries Can Help Reshape the Funding Landscape in Europe. My name is Malcolm Fleming, and I am President of the Association of Charity Lotteries in Europe, or ACLEU for short, and I'm also Director of Public Affairs for the Postcode Lottery Group, who are proud to be one of the supporters of the Paris Peace Forum. Now, ACLEU is a trade body made up of 17 organisations who run charity lotteries to raise funds for civil society across 7 European countries. It is worth stating that charity lotteries are different from state lotteries. They are not-for-profit organisations that exist merely as a fundraising mechanism to support charities and civil society. And they are very successful in doing so. In the last 2 years, last year and the year before, charity lotteries raised 1.5 billion euros for civil society across Europe. But that funding came from just 6 countries, and the other 38 countries in Europe do not, at the moment, have a charity lottery, which is part of the reason where we thought this would be a good topic to discuss, to explore that issue. Now, on your seats, you will find a copy of this report with the same title as this session. And if you look on page 3, you will see it is published in November 2025. And those of you who are paying attention will realize it's still October. So you've got an advance sneak preview. And I hope you don't go and sell it on eBay before next week and to try and get a quick profit. But hopefully that gives you a more in-depth understanding of this topic we are discussing. Now, to discuss this issue about the funding challenges facing civil society and how charity lotteries can be part of that solution, I am joined, I'm pleased to say, by a great panel. We have Gabriella Civico, President of Civil Society Europe, who ACLEU have partnered with for this report. George Collins, Chair of the Lotteries Council in the UK. Joël Villers, Executive Director of Médecins du Monde here in France. And Caroline Descombris, Executive Director of the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative, who many of you will have noticed have a stand downstairs in the Solutions Hub, which you have, if you have not yet been to, I recommend going to. So, just to kick off this discussion, Gabriella, if I can come to you first, given Civil Society Europe's role providing a European-wide voice for civil society and supporting a network of civil society organisations from a range of countries, can you give us a European view of the current fundraising landscape and how challenging it is?
Yes, and thank you. Is it working? Yeah. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here on this panel, and thank you also for the invitation for Civil Society Europe to be involved in co-producing this publication. I hope that you'll all get the chance to read it and use the information inside. I think this is really important that we take everything that's in this publication and use it in our work going forwards. The funding landscape for civil society in Europe is challenging. Of course, other parts of the world also have their own challenges, but in Europe we see some particular shifts, some particular changes recently. At Civil Society Europe, we're a network of 24 networks, so we really have a huge outreach all across Europe, and we can see that civil society organizations are becoming increasingly essential to uphold democratic values in Europe. Our role in providing services and support to vulnerable people in an increasingly precarious world and difficult climate is becoming even greater. But the resources that we have to do that are becoming increasingly uncertain and are dwindling. They're becoming also less. We have a report from the EU Fundamental Rights Agency where 44% of CSOs all across Europe reported unexpected cuts, freezes or reductions in funding in 2024, most notably from national governments. The unexpectedness of these cuts, I think, is important. Civil society organizations need to be sustainable, they need to be stable, they need to be able to know, at least for the near future, what funding is available, and these unexpected cuts are particularly risky for the sector. What the funding is for is also a difficult question. I mentioned, of course, the important role of civil society organizations in service delivery. And what we see is that when organizations are in the service delivery sector, funding is more readily available. Where funding is more difficult to come across is those organizations which are human rights based, which are more advocacy based, which are fighting for fundamental rights, fighting to protect the rule of law. These kind of organizations which are not directly relating to citizens in terms of services, for example, are finding it increasingly difficult to find funding as compared with recent years. As civil society, we're also dependent on a relatively small number of funders, and that makes, of course, the support that charity lotteries give even more important. And the huge impact in recent years of the withdrawal of funding from USAID and also from the Open Societies Foundations had a huge impact on civil society in Europe. The funding was removed very quickly, very suddenly, without replacement, without planning, and this has had really a radical impact. I would also want to mention the type of funding that we have access to. A lot of it is project-based. We don't have that stable, predictable funding that's essential for planning, that's essential for preparing. And that's where we see that the role of charity lottery money actually bucks that trend. Charity lottery money is prepared to fund the core costs of organizations much more than other funders tend to do. So this is really essential, and we're very happy that there is a well-regulated charity lotteries funding possibility across different countries in Europe. We would like to see that grow. We hope that this publication, sessions like this, more conversations around this, would enable also this kind of funding to grow alongside the public funding and alongside the other foundation and philanthropic funding that we have available to us. So difficult times, unpredictable times, but not without hope. I think we see that the public in general trust civil society. They understand the importance of civil society in all our varied roles. And they're very well prepared and very happy to contribute to civil society, partly through taxes or through buying lottery tickets or through direct donations. So I think we need to adapt to these shifts, which we are doing, and we're very grateful for these kind of opportunities to discuss and maybe explore new avenues and new areas where civil society can be properly funded.
Thank you, Gabriella. So, a difficult funding environment, but not without hope. I think that's appropriate now to bring in Joël from the Médecins du Monde. Now, the work of the organisation is well known, I think, especially here in France, but we also know, and Gabriella mentioned it, that there's been significant cuts internationally in international development aid funding, and that landscape in particular is facing great challenges. How is that affecting your organisation and indeed the wider sector?
I will speak in French, so je ne veux pas vous imposer mon accent.
I won't make you listen to my English, so thanks for putting your headsets on. Thank you for inviting me. The associative sector in France has been extremely impacted by these budget cuts. But beyond that, there's been budget cuts. However, beyond that, I think there's a crisis of values in our political projects as well. Our Federation of Actors of Solidarity in France considers that 1 in 4 French associations will disappear by 2026. And that's all associations in France, also like football associations, for example, not just humanitarian associations. These are associations that maintain democratic values in France, and so the sector has been extremely impacted. And immense associations like Secours Catholique, it's an extremely famous in France. I think it's called Caritas internationally. They've said, they've worked. There's been social plans announced from AIDS, another association which works on HIV and AIDS prevention. So there's a lot of trouble in these sectors. There's been budget cuts from the US. We've, of course, heard all about these. But actually, many governments are cutting their budgets. There's a humanitarian reset that's happening. Many NGOs are stopping their projects. UN offices are closing shop. So it's a global crisis. And of course, it's a problem that NGOs are closing shop. But the real problem is that millions of people are not getting the help that they were getting before. So for example, on malnutrition or on food distribution, there's massive issues on food distribution on the ground. The impact on populations is immense, and it's already started. I'm thinking about AIDS and HIV. We've had to close a project in Myanmar. So you were asking me what the impact is for Médecins du Monde. We've had to close projects in Madagascar, in Colombia. We've had to close projects of harm reduction in drug usage to try and have less AIDS, to have AIDS prevention, HIV prevention. So millions of people are now not being reached by our organization. And so I've mentioned this crisis of values, and it's a real problem. There's not enough solidarity, and we need to find financing, and charity lotteries can be a part of that. And we call these non-affected resources. We need funding that we can attribute to what we most need funding to go to. We've got 50% of our funding coming from institutions, 50% from individuals. But funding from things like charity lotteries would allow us to have more unexpected projects, things that donors would not do, things that states would not do, to create pilot projects that generally can then be integrated into national health policies, because we do a good job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe. Well, I think I was particularly struck there by your comment that 1 in 4 French associations will go out of business by next year, which is really shocking. And I think we've called this session "Civil Society Under Pressure." That's really civil society in crisis, in my understanding of it. So I think this debate is very much topical. Now, I'd like to bring in Caroline. Can I ask you, at the Whitaker Peace and Justice Development, you undertake inspiring work, but obviously that takes finance and resources. How are you experiencing the current funding environment?
Thank you, Malcolm, and thank you for having us here at this panel today for this very interesting discussion. So just to give a little bit of background information on who we are, the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative, we are a peace building and development organization, founding in 2012 by Forrest Whitaker. We work in conflict-affected areas around the world, including in Europe, empowering young people and women to really become leaders of change in their communities, and we do that through programs that combine peace building, livelihood, health and well-being, and sports. So to answer your questions, Malcolm, of course, what we are experiencing is an increase in demand for services from the communities that we serve, but unfortunately a high decrease in sustainable funding. To give an example, there is growing need in our sector for mental health support, for education, for social cohesion, and especially among youth and among marginalized communities. And unfortunately, to respond to these needs, it's very difficult for us to attract traditional funders, because they tend to really support short-term projects with quick impact and quick delivery and quick results. But when you are talking about trauma recovery and peace building, you need to have multi-year investment, multi-year approach, and multi-year intervention. I would say, secondly, that, and you have been already talking about it, the brutal downsizing of USAID on our side has been unfortunately a huge impact on our operations. We had to close our office in Mexico, and as Joël has been saying, the one who are paying the high price are the communities that we serve, because who is going to replace the service that we are offering on the ground, and we are losing also a level of expertise from our offices, all the staff, all the communities working hand in hand with us. And what we see because of the closure of USAID is we are experiencing having more and more NGOs who are competing for the same sources of funding, for the same grants. And we see many funders who are overwhelmed by the request and have the tendency to support more and more the NGOs or CSOs who are already in their portfolios. So we are often facing now closed doors because they don't accept and support new NGOs coming on board. And the last point I would like to mention is really like what we are experiencing as a big challenge is the lack of access to unrestricted funding. And to me, really, unrestricted funding is the oxygen that is vital for every survival of any organization. It allows you to innovate, to retain staff. It allows you to scale solutions. And this is not possible because now we are just surviving from project to project, as Gabriella has been mentioning. And the funds are really earmarked to specific activities that have to be aligned with donors' agenda. So you lose also your flexibility and your capacity to remain independent. And sometimes donors' agenda are not fully aligned with the priorities on the ground, which is really becoming a big issue for us on our side. And this is where also the lotteries, for me, has been a fresh air, because they allow us to have this kind of innovation. They are coming on board at phase one of a project when other donors will not want to take the risk. And with the lotteries, we have been able also to reach a mass of results and a mass of beneficiaries that only with that mass of results you can approach traditional funders and will agree to maybe come on board because you have been able to reach that success, I would say. So this is why, for me, working with lottery is key, because they are really strategic partner for resilience and innovation.
Yes, thank you, Caroline. I think that role of lotteries is as a strategic partner in long-term funding and unrestricted funding is key, and perhaps a good point to then bring in George, who is the head of the Lotteries Council in the UK, which is a country which has a strong civil society where there's also funding challenges, but crucially, and in contrast to here in France, has a very strong charity lottery sector. George, can you give us a bit of a picture of the funding challenges in the UK for civic society, but also how having that, that wide charity lottery sector is helping response to that?
Yeah, thank you, Malcolm, and thanks very much for having us today. Just as by way of introduction, the Lotteries Council has around 500 members. Those members are either charitable organisations who are running lotteries and/or suppliers who are supporting the running of those lotteries, a really thriving market. In terms of the fundraising context, it's very similar to what's being discussed here. So in terms of absolute terms, in monetary value, we are up slightly on last year. However, there are less people giving year over year. So the amount of people is less, but they're choosing to give a little bit more. So that's kind of what's propping up the income. What we're also seeing is that younger demographics, younger people, are not engaging as much as they have previously. And so again, year over year, we're seeing less young people give. At the same time, with less people giving, we're also seeing a sharp increase in the need of charities in civil society. So charities are being asked to do a lot more sharply, be it frontline or kind of back of house, but they're being asked to do more with less. So again, echoing a very similar situation. And I think for us that's where the charity lottery market comes from. So I used the word thriving a moment ago. The charity market in the UK is growing over 10% year over year when you look back over a 12-year period, which is incredible. Last year it raised over £1 billion, and that income, certainly in the UK, is generally unrestricted. So that gives the the organisation's choices to where that money then goes, and setting regulation are a set amount, a set percentage of that income that must be returned to the charity, and for the charity's work. I think the other point, which is really interesting, is that it's really sustainable income. So charity lotteries are generally based on a subscription model, and a subscription means regular income for charities. And regular income allows you to plan for the future, plan for gaps, and also invest. Two other points. So when it comes to choice, the other thing about charity lotteries is that generally speaking, they're positioned in a way where it's a little bit more light-hearted, it's arm's length giving, it's more kind of altruistic. And so if messages from the charity side are very set on the charitable cause, actually a lottery allows you to be a little bit more relaxed, tap into a whole new supporter base, a whole new player base. Again, those individuals are choosing to play your organisation because they know that income is supporting the charity moving forward. And then the very last point is in terms of sustainability again, when you look at future giving, certainly for us in the UK, the holy grail, the thing that we're all, as fundraisers, the thing that we're focused on is legacy giving. So somebody giving a gift in their will. And there's a tangible, proven, evidential, data-driven link that the individuals who engage with lotteries then go on to leave a legacy, a gift in their will. So.
Thanks, George. Really interesting, that picture. So now at ACLEU, we are very much aware that the European landscape of this type of civil society funding varies hugely between countries, and that's because of different laws, different regulations, with countries like Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, the UK leading the way. Yet in countries like here in France, there are no charity lotteries and not at the moment even a legal framework to set them up. So Joël, you are a strong advocate for the establishment of a charity lottery sector here in France. Can you say a little bit about why that is and what difference do you think it would make?
Thanks. Merci. Déjà, il faut bien comprendre l'enjeu.
First of all, you have to understand what is at stake. What is at stake is civil society, its associations, and what they represent in the French landscape. There are many associations in France. There are those like us which focus on solidarity, but there are also cultural and sports associations which play a fundamental role in terms of democracy, in terms of mixity, in terms of getting people together. And we are all aware, we all notice that we have a real funding problem and more needs, as I was saying, on the ground in France, but also abroad. So this is why I have trouble understanding why today we do not have charity lotteries in France. We have a problem, which is this funding crisis, and we have a solution, which could be a charity lottery. Now, we are in France, there is a state monopoly. There are things that are reserved, but quite clearly, Médecins du Monde and others are pushing towards accessing this type of funding. We know what charity lotteries are like at Médecins du Monde because we can benefit from this in the Netherlands already. So it's not completely new to it. It works elsewhere. Why couldn't it work here in France? So I'm not going to repeat what has just been said by my co-panelists, but I believe that you've all underlined that one of the first advantages is the long term. When you want to offer more social justice, when you want to change things, it takes time. And we have very few donors who give us this kind of time. 6 to 12 month funding, you can put up a Band-Aid. Funding over 4 to 5 years, we go further, we improve the system.
Mais aussi
I've mentioned this before, but there's also a liberty of choosing the program, not necessarily choosing according to geopolitical interests. It's the possibility of choosing according to where we feel we will be more efficient and offer more change. It also allows us to develop expertise and added value. Civil society in France is one of the largest employers in the country. We create jobs, we can invest in innovation and not just be in fixing things. So I can only see benefits to this. What else should I add? I believe that we need charity lotteries in France, and it can be an opportunity for all associations. You were saying that I was advocating for this, but I'm not advocating only for my association, but I believe it can really be a game changer for French society at large. I will end by saying that I really hope that we will soon have a charity lottery in France, but the state still needs to be committed. The state has responsibilities and still has to subsidize civil society. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe. I think it's, who knows, perhaps next year we'll be celebrating having that charity lottery here in France. We hope so. Caroline, can I ask you what you would add to that? I know your organisation, and you touched on it earlier, has received funding from charity lotteries in Sweden, for example. What's your experience of that support, but also would the establishment of a similar funding stream here in France presumably be welcome as well?
Thank you, Malcolm. I think I'm fully aligned with what Joël has been saying. I think in France you have all the ingredients to have charity lotteries that would be bringing really an added value. And especially citizens would have this capacity to also really contribute to causes that really matter to them. And we have such a vibrant community of organizations. We are part of them. We just opened 2 years ago an office in Aubervilliers. We have a community learning center. We have been working hand in hand with a lot of local associations. We are doing an amazing work with a handful of individuals who, with access to very little funding, are already able to catalyze very powerful change. And I think this type of small local organization, they don't have access to traditional funders. And I think having this opportunity to work with lotteries and being able to have predictable long-term funding from charity lotteries, as Joël has been saying, would be a game changer. Because I really see charity lotteries as an amazing tool to be able to contribute and helping to bridge the gap between public funding and grassroots needs. And the needs, as you said, in France is really quite large. My experience working with lotteries, I said before, is really fresh air, is really giving you opportunity to innovate, to scale, but also to plan long term, which is very key. And there is one element I would like to add, and maybe which has not been said yet, is having a partner who is able and willing to give you unrestricted funding, long-term unrestricted funding, is building a relationship of trust. And I think trust is very important because it's a boost that you need also on your side to become more creative, to be able to innovate. And I think really working with a partner who is able to create this trust relationship for me is very precious. And unfortunately, we see these tendencies that traditional funders are not really willing to come into unrestricted funding, even if you have been working with them for a very large number of years. We see that, unfortunately, the tendency is that they are not open to coming into that, unfortunately. And to me, it's really a huge challenge, and I really hope they will reach to a point that they will understand that really the model that the charity lottery is developing is something that it's becoming very crucial for the very survival of a lot of organizations.
Thank you, Caroline. Now if we can go back to you, George, you said I think you used the word thrive, so the thriving charity lottery sector in the UK. Obviously, there's a different political context in different countries, which is always changing, and I know the Lotteries Council in the UK has done a lot of engagement with the UK government, sometimes more difficult than others. But do you see any reason why, for example, here in France, the charity lottery model, which does work so effectively in the UK, couldn't also operate?
So in short, no, absolutely not. I think the one consistent thing is that there's a need, and I think that's where we should probably start and focus on. There's a need, and there's a charity lottery model that directly addresses that need. So yes, there's engagement with politicians. Yes, there's regulation, but it's not something that's completely new. It already exists, and so there's already a lot of learnings that can be applied to that. I think the other point is that from a charity lottery perspective, it's not getting in the way of or trying to overcome traditional giving. It works very much alongside it. And also, when we look at state lotteries, in the UK, again, it's proven that charity lotteries complement the state lottery rather than threaten it. And I think that's often quite a concern. That's one of the things that holds us back. And there's a lot of dialogue in the UK about that. But they do very much work together. I think, if that wasn't enough, the model works, it's proven. I think the document that's in front of you all or on the chairs addresses the fact that there's estimated to be 10 billion euro opportunity. So if there's a question as to why, I think that kind of addresses it. So ultimately, yes, model works, the demand exists, and the benefits are proven.
Thanks, George. I think one small point I'd add to that, which I think, as someone who's previously worked in government, is the beauty of introducing charity lotteries as a potential policy choice that crucially doesn't cost the government any money, which is always a welcome one for policy advisors. Now, Gabriella, Civil Society Europe have a strong record of advocating to governments and especially to the European institutions in Brussels to take action to protect and to promote civil society. And sometimes in the conversations read about fundraising or philanthropy, the term an enabling environment is used to encourage governments to get the right policy frameworks in place to help fundraising. Is that something Civil Society Europe advocate for, and how do you think this debate fits into that?
Yes, absolutely. The enabling environment for civil society and from my organization where I work, the Center for European Volunteering, enabling environment for volunteering, for civic participation is essential for our democratic processes, for our model and way of life that we cherish so much in Europe, where we have freedom of association, where we have the rule of law, where we have fundamental rights protected, or at least in theory we do. Civil society has been facing increasing attacks, so it's not only about the cuts and the reduction in funding, it's also about the smear attacks, the public campaigns against civil society, restrictive legislations, trying to erode trust between citizens and civil society, trying to build a wedge between us. So all of this is making a very difficult environment, compounded by increased demands and requests on civil society and operating in an environment of increased funding. We also see growing administrative burdens on civil society. We see that grant givers are probably quite rightly concerned about transparency. They are concerned about being seen to being fair in the way that they distribute funding. And I think that this is very often wrongly misinterpreted as a need to add administrative burdens and administrative hurdles. And I think what we've heard and what we see from the charity lottery model is that that's not necessarily the way, that there is an understanding that there can be transparency, there can be access to funding without having these undue hurdles in place. The independence of funding is also becoming increasingly important in Europe. We probably didn't think so, but increasingly public funding is becoming more politically charged, more politically motivated, more politically directed, and therefore private funding, such as through charity lotteries, is becoming an increasingly important factor in the overall funding and support ecosystem as being a funding source that's not politically charged or politically motivated in a particular party political way, let's say. So this is also really, really essential in these difficult times. We need to protect democracy. For that, we need exactly an enabling environment. We need resources, and this variety of resources, and hopefully an increasingly variety of resources, if the charity lottery model can be extended across different countries, will certainly give a boost to exactly a civil society under increasing pressure.
Thank you, Gabriella. Now we have got a little bit of time for one or two questions from the audience, if anyone wants to. One here.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone. Hi, my name is Corey. I work for American Philanthropy, so first off, sorry for everything that's coming out of my country at the moment. But I wanted to touch on 2 points that tie into my question. One is the closure of civic space that you mentioned. We see that that's even worse in the global south and repressive countries where 55% of civil society organizations will be forced to close by this December. And as Caroline said, civil society is facing an existential threat and politicized and vilified attack. So I'm curious how, for any and all of the panelists, how you're thinking about the strategic defense of civic space and how you protect the integrity of civil society, not just the funding component, but also how do you create more room for the importance of democracy, human rights, and peace funding and activity at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, who would like to take that one, perhaps, Gabriella?
Yes, I mean, one of the things that we really promote are civil society strategies. The EU at the moment is preparing a civil society strategy, which hopefully will have a very strong civil dialogue component. These are kind of maybe buzzwords, but we really believe in these things. Dialogue is absolutely essential. We need to have structured mechanisms where policymakers and civil society representatives can talk, can exchange, can debate, can understand each other's perspectives, and particularly policymakers can understand the challenges of civil society. So having this structured civil dialogue within the framework of a civil dialogue, a civil society strategy, for us is absolutely essential. And these are the sorts of things that we are building for on the EU level, also at Council of Europe level, and then of course at member states level as well. So making sure that these things are rights to civil dialogue, rights to civil society, rights to freedom of association are really established and embedded in laws and procedures.
Joe, come in.
Oui, merci pour la question. Juste quelques.
Thank you for the question. Just a few answers. I do understand that it's not only a financial approach, but without finance, there's nothing. Financial independence is meaningful because it gives you political independence. I did not understand all the question, but on American funding, the Mexico City policy issue, there is funding, but those funds are very politically oriented. The Mexico City policy today, if Médecins du Monde receives state government, federal, U.S. federal state, we have to commit to never practice abortion anywhere in the world. So those funds are being refused to us in a way. We created a fund within Médecins du Monde to help local civil society associations, or at least our partners, because it really is a disaster, and not just for their existence. I'm talking about the quality of healthcare and operations. Médecins du Monde, we are mostly focused on medical assistance, but very often we also often have WASH partners, so that's water and sanitation. It's silly to cure people, give health care if we don't have drinking water. So our partners who are working on projects with us are shutting down because they don't have access to funding. So this is a global system. Each one has their role to play. And that's why it's important to have this long-term funding that doesn't have a political motivation or orientation. So financial independence is only useful if you are politically independent. Thank you.
I think, that issue of the civil society here not just getting the funding for their own work in the Global South, but also their partners having to close, is hugely impactful on the work trying to be done both by the partners but by yourselves. Caroline, is that something you experience in the countries you're working in, that your partners are increasingly at threat of even just existing as they go forward? Do you feel the partners you work with in the countries that the Whitaker Peace and Development Initiative operates in, are they're under severe pressure in terms of their funding, in terms of working with you? So is that structure, that ecosystem, in danger of collapse?
I think when we do in countries that are really like fragile countries, we consider fragile countries, we work a lot in consortium with other NGOs and fundraising together, and joining especially also UN agencies. This is the better way for us to really access funds that will be not politicized, and making sure that we remain independent. But as Joël has been saying, of course, to remain independent, you need to be financially sustainable. And of course, we are closing our office in Mexico because we are not accepting also funding that are coming from groups or like any corporates or any I would say government funding that would really force you to have an approach that is completely contrary to your mission. And on our side, also working with a public figure like Mr. Whitaker, you have to be very careful on the messaging that you want to have. So that's why we have to be selective with the partners that we work. And that's why working with charity lotteries for us is gaining independence and having the security of making sure that what we are doing, we have the hands not tied, but the hands free to really advocate for the message that we want to deliver.
Thank you. One more question. I think we've got time for one more, quickly.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the panel. My name's Nick Haley. I run a conflict resolution charity based in the UK. And forgive the direct question, but for charities like mine that don't currently get postcode lottery funding, what are the key things that the funders look out for that would best position organizations like ours to become a partner? Thank you.
Well, thank you. And I think all funders are looking at a range of the organisations they're looking to support, and how the fact that they are good organisations, the due diligence. And we talked a little bit about trust, the trust model, and that way of trusting charities and organisations to do the work. But I think one of the benefits of that is, yes, you do the due diligence. It's not a matter of not doing the due diligence. But you do the due diligence on a charity, and once you've done it, then you trust that they know how to do the work better than organisations like charity lotteries do. I think in terms of your question about how to get access to the funding, one of it really is about can charity lotteries have access to more funds to fund more charities. So at the moment, partly because of the nature of the long-term funding relationships that charity lotteries like the postcode lottery have. If you keep funding the same charities year on year, obviously to have more funds to fund other charities, you have to grow in some way. Now there's various ways you can grow. You can, crucially, you can sell more subscriptions. So I would encourage anyone who's any of the countries we operate in to subscribe. And more subscriptions means more funds to give out to good causes. But also, one of the things we're looking at here is more countries where we can operate in to increase that funding across different countries. And we see it, this report looks a bit about how that operates in different countries, but we see, 1.5 billion being raised from just 5 really European countries just now, plus a very small amount in a few others. 10 billion a year it could be raised if it was in more European countries. But also, I think we're always looking at, even where we do operate, can we get the government to have a system which works better for us to raise more funding and having that good operating environment. But yes, in terms of your own organisation, come and have a conversation with us. We're always happy. Well, the doors are always open. Can't guarantee will result in funding, but happy to talk. Now I am aware the clock is ticking down, so unless there's anyone desperate for any more questions, I'll just George, on you go.
One other thing, just to answer to your question as well, sorry to go back a question. I think the big thing is accessibility as well. So when you're looking at diversity of income, charity lotteries are not just for the largest organisations. Many are very, very small micro organisations who have a very core group or people who could support. And so I think accessibility is a big thing to consider from a charity lottery perspective.
Great. Thanks, George, and thanks for your questions. I think the time is ticking down, so I think we'll probably bring the session to a close unless any of the panelists have got a burning need for any more comments. No? On you go, Joel. And I suppose one thing, when you're going to answer this question, one thing I wanted to ask was, you talked a lot about the funding part of charity lotteries. What about the fun part in terms of, would the French public, do you think, want to play and perhaps win with charity lotteries?
I have no doubt about it. I mean, it's one of you were talking about the rivalry between national lottery and between postcode lottery or charity lottery. For us, we are also convinced they will. I'm talking in English. Sorry. For us, there will be no rivalry, for example, with what we do with the public generosity. It's new funds. It will not mean that we will have less donors, less individual donors. So it's a complementary approach, and we will continue to fight to find a license for a charity lottery in France. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Can I just ask everyone to show their appreciation for the panel, and thanks for coming along.